On this Monday night, a new wave of COVID-19 and the same old problems. The crisis looming in long-term care homes.
It seems like a Band-Aid solution.
The new help being brought in and the questions about qualifications. The dispute with no resolution in sight.
We cannot, as a government, tell First Nations what a moderate livelihood is.
Demands to better protect Indigenous fishers. Good luck getting a flu shot, why some Canadians will have to wait to roll up their sleeves. And switching political parties.
I can't possibly, in good conscience, support this type of president.
For Republicans swearing off Donald Trump.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin with what is happening in long-term care homes in parts of this country. Community spread of COVID-19 is beginning to seep into care homes again. British Columbia reported 4 new outbreaks in long-term care homes over the weekend. There are now almost 20 long-term care, assisted living and acute care facilities with outbreaks in that province. In Ontario, 86 long-term care facilities now have outbreaks and more than 1,900 residents have died in that province. Nationally, about 80% of COVID-19 related deaths have been in long-term care. Hiring and retaining enough staff to work in them remains a huge issue. As Mike Drolet reports, the solutions being looked at are nothing more than Band-Aids.
The first wave of COVID-19 put a wall between Maureen McDermott and her mother.
I can't tell you what it was like to visit my mother outside of a window with COPD, dementia and Alzheimer's at 93, and getting COVID.
Miraculously, she survived, but when her long-term care home opened its doors in July, the figurative wall between mother and daughter remained. She no longer remembered Maureen, who is now fearful and anxious of a second wave.
It's like a PTSD that's just creeping up that we're going to have to go through this again. So these plans need to be in place with no questions.
Except there's a lot of those. Donna Duncan, the director of the Ontario Long-Term Care Association, told an independent commission she expected solutions over the summer. Are we ready? We're concerned that we're not. She added that staffing remains a critical issue. With lower pay and benefits than hospital workers who do the same job, long-term care homes have had problems retaining, much less hiring new staff.
You know, calling them heroes on the front line or throwing them a couple extra bucks here or there for a few months, that's temporary. We need a solid, permanent solution.
In the spring, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau sent in the military to the hardest hit facilities. For the second wave, he's announced funding for the Red Cross to hire staff to help personal support workers with the basics, such as socializing with seniors, feeding them, and making sure they're safe. And as to the qualifications needed to apply for the job, it comes down to you have to like seniors and pass a police check. Standards industry insiders say would have been unthinkable pre-pandemic.
Because if you're trying to move somebody and they're a 2-person lift and there's nobody else to help you, you're going to grab somebody who's available, and that's going to be an untrained worker. And that's unsafe for both the worker as well as the resident.
The job postings have been up for just over a week. The Red Cross declined to say how many Canadians have applied.
Well, I think we've learned something. The question is, have we provided any solutions? And I think those are two different questions.
Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
The outbreak at a Spinco studio in Hamilton, Ontario has turned into a cautionary tale of exponential spread. The city of Hamilton has created a graphic showing how what started as one infection has led to at least 74 cases of COVID-19 in the community. The graphic shows that one case led to 48 infections at the Spinco studio in downtown Hamilton and then spread more widely, infecting people in 15 households, 8 schools and childcare centers, 6 healthcare facilities, and 22 other workplaces. Hamilton's medical officer of health says that happened even though the Spin Studio and its patrons followed all public health guidelines for fitness studios. The province is now reviewing those guidelines. In Quebec, frustrated healthcare workers disrupted traffic on 2 bridges today, demanding better working conditions. Nurses and other healthcare workers briefly blocked traffic on the Quebec Bridge in Quebec City and on the Jacques Cartier Bridge in Montreal. Union representatives say the pandemic is putting a strain on the healthcare system and say workers deserve more stable schedules, improved nurse-to-patient ratios, and more full-time positions. Quebec reported more than 1,000 new cases of COVID-19 today. At the same time, we are moving into flu season, and we've all heard the message that it's more important than ever to get your flu shot this year, so hospitals aren't overrun with both flu and COVID-19 patients. Flu shots are now available across most of the country. Appointment-only clinics opened in Alberta and Saskatchewan today. The plan is to distribute a record amount of flu vaccine without having mass vaccination clinics. As Heather Yourex-West explains, that means long waiting lists in some places.
Al Hendry gets a flu shot every year, but this year, facing the double threat of flu and COVID-19, Hendry made sure he was among the first in line.
Just decided we wanted to sign up and get it done early.
A lot of regulars, but we've had a lot of people come in that don't usually get their flu vaccination. So I think there's more interest this year for sure.
Pharmacies like this one have been busy in recent days, helping to meet what's expected to be record demand for the flu vaccine without the usual clinics operated by public health. Usually a spike in demand for vaccine results in long lineups and crowded clinics, but under COVID-19 protocols, each appointment takes more time.
Every injection that we do, every flu shot that we do, takes about 10 minutes in total.
Chu says the staggered appointments are necessary to cut down on the number of people in the pharmacy at one time, but it means available openings are filling up fast.
So what's happening right now is that up to 2 weeks from today's date, it's all booked up, but we will be opening up more spots as the vaccines keep on coming in and we do get confirmation that it is coming in.
The fall's flu shot rollout is being seen by many as a chance to practice for a possible COVID-19 vaccine rollout. In Kelowna, BC, one doctor's office offered the shot at a drive-through clinic, while the Saskatchewan Health Authority is making the vaccine available in as many locations as it can.
In approaching this with an all-hands-on-deck approach where every healthcare encounter is an opportunity to be immunized for influenza, we can trial a new way to do things.
To see what works and what doesn't, ahead of what everyone hopes will be another vaccine rollout very soon. Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
Canada has now surpassed more than 200,000 cases of COVID-19. British Columbia reported a new high today, 174 new positive tests. Manitoba had 80 new cases of COVID-19 today, and new restrictions are going into effect there. In Winnipeg and several surrounding communities, gatherings are now limited to a maximum of 5 people. Bars, entertainment facilities, and casinos are closed for 2 weeks. In Ontario, 704 new cases were reported today, and the provincial government recommended against trick-or-treating in the COVID-19 hot zones. That includes York Region, which is now in stage 2 of that province's pandemic protocol. It means gyms, movie theaters, and casinos are closed, and indoor dining at restaurants is banned. The new rules will be in place for 28 days. And the Canada-U.S. border will stay closed until at least November 21st. The land border travel restrictions were extended again today. The border has been shut down to all non-essential travel since March. Just over 2 weeks to go until the U.S. presidential election, and Americans are already voting in record numbers. Nearly 30 million people have cast ballots in early voting, often lining up for hours at polling stations which were not prepared to handle all the people. It could point to a record turnout this election. And as Jackson Proskow reports, there are some theories about what all this early voting could mean.
In Greenville, North Carolina, they're not waiting for November 3rd.
I want to get it over with early for the crowd get here.
It's the same story in Florida, where huge lines met the first day of early voting and where 18% of voters have already returned their mail-in ballots.
This is a lifetime election. This is a very important election.
Millions of Americans have decided it's better to vote now, standing in line for 4 hours or more in some cities instead of waiting for an uncertain election day.
I think a lot of people don't want to wait to the last minute.
The pandemic, fears of voter intimidation, and President Donald Trump's baseless claims about the vote.
This is going to be a fraud like you've never seen.
Have driven record-shattering early turnout across the country, 10 times higher than in 2016.
The first thing we're seeing in early voting is just massive turnout, record-breaking turnout. We've seen turnout approaching 30 million votes at this point.
Nearly 1 million North Carolinians voted in person in just the first 4 days of early voting. many driven by fears that mail-in ballots will be disqualified.
I think it's very important that you do go vote in person instead of mailing in your ballot. That way you know your vote is cast and know there's no way to rig that type of election.
Who's turning out early? So far, more Democrats than Republicans, more women than men. That may not last.
A lot of Republicans have clearly listened to the president, and it appears they're holding off until Election Day to cast their ballot. That does call a lot of this into question in terms of where it ends up.
That is the great unknown. Uncertainty is driving early voter turnout.
This just seemed like the most guaranteed way.
It's also making it unusually tough for either side to know how the election will unfold. All Donald Trump and Joe Biden can do is convince their supporters to vote, no matter when, where, or how they do it. Jackson Proskow, Global News, Greenville, North Carolina.
Now to the dispute over the lobster fishery in Nova Scotia. After days of demanding federal intervention, federal cabinet ministers turned their attention today to the escalating violence against Indigenous fishers.
The acts of violence we have seen in the past days and weeks are disgusting, unacceptable, and racist in nature.
The federal public safety minister has called in RCMP reinforcements from other provinces, but after a weekend of violence, including the torching of a Mi'kmaq lobster fishing compound, it's not at all clear that sending in more police will resolve what's at the heart of the conflict. Abigail Bimman reports.
Early this morning in southwest Nova Scotia, a protest by commercial fishers outside a federal government office. They say they've been reporting growing tensions for years with no action.
We've been shut out by the federal government.
Ottawa says it's listening to the concerns and lobster conservation is crucial.
The Indigenous fisheries industry is an infinitely small portion of the commercial fisheries. It's very important for people to get that.
Create a precedent of fishing outside of the season and then enabling many more fishermen and traps in the water in 5, 10, 20 years from now. Then, you might have a serious issue with conservation.
Part of the issue, there's no definition for moderate livelihood. Indigenous fishers were granted the right to fish for one in a 1999 Supreme Court decision. The fisheries minister says she won't negotiate in public.
We cannot, as a government, tell First Nations what a moderate livelihood is. That is up to them to work with us to define.
While the public safety minister says more police are on the ground in Nova Scotia available for land and water after this massive lobster pound fire that left a person of interest in hospital with serious injuries. The Sabanakadee First Nation chief says it's not enough. He says Indigenous fishers are unprotected on the water, facing vandalism.
DFO needs to come in. There's been no presence there at all. They send one Coast Guard boat on the water, but that Coast Guard boat's been there when everything else went down. It's just like the police officer standing there. They're just standing by.
There is a need for significant reform in respect to how police perform their services in Indigenous communities.
But the public safety minister stopped short of his Indigenous services minister colleague, who said Monday Indigenous people have been let down by the police who are sworn to protect them. Abigail Bimman, Global News, Ottawa.
We have an in-depth look at what's led to the lobster fishery dispute in Nova Scotia. That's on our website, globalnews.ca/globalnational. Some Americans are making it clear how they'll vote. Coming up, the Republicans who were refusing to support Trump. Plus, how to have fun at a concert in the time of COVID-19. It's been just over 6 months since the global number of COVID-19 cases hit 1 million. Today, that number is 40 times higher. According to Johns Hopkins University, the world surpassed 40 million confirmed cases today, as many countries face a second wave. 3 countries, the U.S., India, and Brazil, account for more than half of the infections in the world. A surge in cases in Europe is forcing some countries to reimpose lockdown measures. In Belgium, the government warns shutdowns are needed to prevent what it calls a tsunami of infections. Restaurants and bars have closed in Belgium and will stay that way for 4 weeks. The government is also restricting alcohol sales and imposing limits on social interactions. Belgium's health minister says he fears the country could get to the point where he says it can no longer control what's happening. And Sweden, which resisted imposing restrictions in the early months of the pandemic, is now planning localized restrictions. There's been a steady rise in COVID-19 cases there over the past 6 weeks. Sweden's public health agency is working with regional authorities that, as of today, can enforce restrictions such as reduced hours at restaurants. Sweden is the only Scandinavian country to surpass 100,000 cases, and its death rate per capita is among the highest in the world. And though COVID-19 is still a big problem in Brazil, some people are enjoying live music there again with safety protocols in place. This outdoor concert in Rio de Janeiro set up physically distanced dance boxes for groups of 6 people. Brazil has reported over 5.2 million COVID-19 infections. Still ahead, she's demanding democracy for Belarus, but she's in exile. We hear from the woman who many feel should be leading the country. Tens of thousands of people in Belarus are refusing to give up. They're still taking to the streets of the capital, demanding Alexander Lukashenko step down. It is widely accepted he lost August's election to opposition leader Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. Many governments, including Canada's, call that election fraudulent. Tikhanovskaya is now living in exile in Lithuania with her 2 children. Our Redmond Shannon spoke to her about the challenges she faces and the important role she says Canada is playing in the struggle.
Another weekend, another huge demonstration in Belarus. Tens of thousands marched despite a threat police would use firearms, again calling for President Alexander Lukashenko to step down.
We have to decide everything by ourselves.
The woman they believe won August's election remains in exile in neighbouring Lithuania.
I would be more useful here in safe than in jail in Belarus, because I'm sure that as only I pass the border, I will be jailed.
Svetlana Tikhanovskaya only entered the campaign after her husband, an opposition activist, was jailed in May. She finally spoke to him on the phone just a week ago.
He was upset because he asked how his children, and I told him that our younger daughter, she's crying every evening. Where is my daddy? And she's only 5, but I think she realizes that it's too long that he's absent.
Tikhanovskaya leads a group of mostly female opposition activists, all jailed or in exile.
Now in Belarus, everybody is fighting. Women, old people, people with special needs. You know, everybody is against this regime.
Tikhanovskaya has demanded that police violence ends, that political prisoners are freed, and that Lukashenko resign by Sunday. Otherwise, she says there will be a huge nationwide strike the next day. On Friday, Canadian Foreign Minister François-Philippe Champagne and Tikhanovskaya resisted an urge to hug. She says he was the first foreign politician to call her in exile.
He was so just talking to me like a friend. I was so inexperienced. I didn't know what to talk about with foreign leaders, but he was so kind. He was so supportive.
Svetlana Tikhanovskaya has had to learn leadership fast. She says mediation talks are now key and insists Russia, which supports Lukashenko, must be at the table. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Getting off the Trump train next, the Republicans rallying against the president. President Donald Trump certainly has an enthusiastic base of supporters, but there are some Republicans who are fed up with his rhetoric and say they will vote Democrat for the first time in their lives. Some have formed groups trying to get more Republicans to vote for Joe Biden. Mike Armstrong spoke with one lifelong Republican who says he didn't leave the party left him.
You would like to be voting Republican.
You know, I would love to be voting Republican because
it's not easy to go against the party you've supported your entire life. It's even harder to go public. Well, James Simpson of Middletown, New York, did.
As a long-term Republican, I can't possibly, in good conscience, support this type of president.
This Republican Party is not my Republican Party.
Simpson's video is one of close to 1,000 submitted to a group called Republican Voters Against Trump.
This is insane.
The group's posting videos of Republicans not supporting the president and their often blunt reasons.
He's just not stupid and mean. He's cruel.
They're bringing crime. They're rapists.
It's time to reclaim the Republican Party from Donald Trump.
Now, the group isn't trying to turn a big portion of hardcore Trump supporters. It wants to peel away some who might have reservations.
Just showing them that there's other people like them.
Connor Metz works on videos for the group. He says the strategy is to give Republicans a sort of permission to vote Democrat, to show them it's okay, whether they're voting for the first time or the 20th.
My family was very Republican, and here I am, 97, watching someone like Trump.
Now, the group focuses on swing states, places where even if it only convinces a small fraction of voters to cross, it can make a difference. The road to the White House gets very complicated for Donald Trump without states like Wisconsin, where he won by less than 1%.
Republicans like us voting for Joe Biden could turn this from a narrow Trump win to a Biden landslide.
Have you lost friends?
You know, there are individuals that I wouldn't say that I've lost friends, okay? I would say that for myself, I've lost respect for some of my friends.
It's still sad.
It is sad. It is a sad thing, yeah.
Joe Biden loves our country.
The group was founded by established, longtime Republican strategists, commentators, and staffers. They say the goal isn't to tear the party down, just to remove Trump and rebuild.
I've never voted for a Democrat.
The idea is to go back. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Middletown, New York.
And that is Global National for this Monday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is Musquodoboit Harbour in Nova Scotia. There are beautiful spots all over Canada. Please email us yours to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.